In this movie we will discuss the use of message boxes. Oftentimes you will want to display a message box to the user to display a message, or maybe to respond to invalid data, or perhaps when the user has neglected to enter some required data. You can display a message to the user in a message box, which is nothing more than a special type of window. The message box has four basic parts: the text message itself, which is a string, the title bar text, which is also a string, the message box buttons that you would have the user to click on, and an icon, which is optional, to help explain the purpose of the message box. In this movie I will discuss the basic components of the message box and how to construct a message box. Now in this example I simply have a button whose job is to display the message box. So I will click on that button, and of course this could be used in the context in a program that could respond to an error message or some other type of condition by the user. I'll close the properties window and the toolbox to provide more room for the code. After a simple comment that will display a message box, the technique used to display a message box is by simply using the keyword messagebox.show. Show is the method which is used to display a message within a message box. The message box itself is a predefined object of the message box class that you can now use to display a message. You could simply include parentheses and then enclose in quotation marks a message, such as this is a sample message. And technically that's all that's required of a message box. If we run this simple example, we can see that the message box is displayed. Now, the OK button is automatically supplied as a default button. As you will see momentarily, you'll be able to change that or to include that in your message. You'll notice also the blue title bar of the message box itself is empty. That is because we chose to leave that out in this example. And then the fourth item which could be included here is an icon. We'll return to our code and modify our example. Now, modifying our code that will display the message box, after you display what your message should be, you then need a comma, which will then allow you to enter the second component. And the second component is the text that you want to appear as the title bar. And again, this has to be enclosed in quotation marks. So I will include something like sample title bar, and then a comma. And as you can see, there's a pop-up IntelliSense window that will give you your options for your message box. Of course, you could type all this in, or you simply select from the list. We've seen the OK button and the fact that it will automatically appear. I'm going to choose OK Cancel as my message box buttons for this example. One more comma, and then you could display from the list provided the icon that you would like included. I will simply include the exclamation icon for this example. Now we have a more complete message box described. So if we now run this, and then take a look at how this looks, we now see the difference. We still have our message. We now have the OK button and the cancel buttons provided. We also have a title bar, and we have the exclamation icon. Now, of course, the OK and cancel buttons won't really be functional unless we write additional code to say, if the OK button is pressed, perform this action. If the cancel button is pressed, perform this action. That will be discussed when we cover if statements in this tutorial. By default, the close button is provided for the user to click on close so that they can close the message box. Some quick things to remember about the message box itself. The message that you display must be a string literal that is enclosed in quotation marks. It could also be a string variable that has been defined elsewhere in the program. The title bar is also a string, and as you saw in the first example, if this entry is left blank, then the title bar will indeed be blank. Note that the title bar message must be the second parameter in the messagebox.show list. The third item is the message box buttons. When you show a message box, you can specify the buttons to display. When if statements are discussed, we will create functionality to these buttons. Your choices are simply the OK button, the OK and cancel buttons, the retry and cancel buttons, the yes and the no buttons, yes, no, and cancel buttons, and also the abort, retry, ignore option. The default for the show method is OK. So unless you specify otherwise, you will get the OK button in your message box. And finally, the fourth option is the icon. Your choices for the icons are the asterisk, an error icon, the exclamation icon, the hand, the informational icon, the question mark, the stop sign, or the warning icon.